Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. My name is Katie Earle. I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and we're joined here virtually with Jocelyn Bos-Fisher. Very excited to have her because I think this topic is always very important, but especially right now with everything that is going on, still going on. So before we get to all of her information, I'll go over a couple housekeeping things because we do have some new folks here today. I'll let you know that we are recording this session and I'll try to post it online at a later date. Second thing, which I'm sure you've noticed by now, is that you've joined without a video of yourself showing and you're muted. You've done nothing wrong. That's just the settings of this program. And you also might think you're the only one here with us today, but I promise you there are others, as you've heard. It's just that Jocelyn and I are the only ones that can see. Everybody's here. So we're in anonymous participation mode. We'll be communicating with you through the Q&A feature. So when some of you joined today, that likely popped up on the right side of your screen. You may just have to hit that little caret to expand it. And you'll see the text box. So type in your questions and your comments when you think of them right away. Make sure they're coming to me, Katie Earle, and we'll try to get to as many as we can during the time we have together. And just excited to be here. So I want to thank the sponsors of our program, my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans, because they help make this program possible. If you ever need any help for yourself or a loved one, looking to see what you qualify for in terms of benefits, don't hesitate to give us a call at Senior Services. We're at 858-8526. And I will introduce Jocelyn. Jocelyn works as a clinical program manager for a local employee assistance program. She works with employees from over 115 different companies in the Western New York area, conducting assessments and short-term therapy work, delivering seminar presentations, collaborating with supervisors on workplace change, and helping coordinate effective and streamlined care for overall employee health. She received her master's degree in social work at the University of Buffalo and has experience working with multiple systems within the Western New York area. She is passionate about promoting cultural change at all levels of an organization to promote a strong and resilient workforce in Western New York. Without further ado, I'll turn it over. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. So as Katie mentioned, we have the Q&A function today. So if any questions throughout, please feel free to type in any questions, answers, and Katie's going to be helping manage that throughout. So you don't have to wait till the end. If you have any ideas, thoughts on sort of the slides that I'm talking about or the information, the topic, we're going to be covering and discussing how do we create a healthy state of mind, creating overall well-being, which, as Katie says, pretty timely topic, really after the unexpected events in March and now the shutdown, global pandemic, as a clinical program manager, as a social worker, really seeing how this is impacting us all on a day-to-day basis. And our mental health workers out there really are front lines in some other ways of seeing the impact that people are dealing with and struggling with and trying to adapt to. So ideally today we're going to be focusing on how do we adapt, right? How do we move forward from anything that might be going on? And in general, how important it is to be prioritizing our own well-being. So today's agenda, as I mentioned, is a little bit talking about really this idea of mental health and mental illness and how these are really two separate things. Bringing up a little bit about what does this mean now during the time of COVID, civil unrest, these two global pandemics in their own way. What's the impact of mental health overall? And really trying to shift, more importantly, what do we do, right? How do we proactively manage this? How do we try to shift out of this so we're all functioning the best that we can, so we can continue to adapt and be flexible in the time that there's a lot of uncertainty still. So two different concepts here, right? Mental health versus then this idea of mental illness, right? And even now, right, we're doing something a little bit different here with a virtual platform. If I was here in person, we'd have more discussion piece. So, there's two different ideas here. Sometimes when people hear mental health, they really think, okay, that's mental illness, right? That's sort of those more extreme situations I hear about in the news. There are two different things, right? Mental health is just our overall mental well-being, right? We all have mental health. We all have mental health and we all have to worry about it and take care of it just as we do our own physical health. It's our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, the ability for us to sort of start to solve problems, overcome those difficulties, right? We all live in our heads most of the time. So how do we try to make that a happy, healthy, and strong place? Some areas that we will start to talk about how we can proactively try to manage this mental health in a more healthy way. Productive activities, healthy relationships, and social connection. And we'll talk a little bit about what does that mean when all we keep hearing is social distancing, which is not social isolation. So two different things here. And it's really our ability to adapt and change and cope with adversity, right? So if we have strong mental health, we can take on these stressors, these things that we're not quite prepared for, we had not been planning for, because we'll be able to bounce back sooner, quicker, and come out stronger, ideally. Versus mental illness, right? So two different things. Mental illness is an actual illness that affects the way that we think, feel, and behave, right? So mental health is overall the emotions, thoughts, and feelings, whereas the illness is what's impacting that. That's what's challenging that to maybe not quite work as well as it usually has. Very, very variable. There's lots of different types of mental illnesses, different symptoms that impact in different ways. And just as an illness, it's curable, right? It can be managed if it's not something that can go away, right? So we can manage a mental illness. Trying to learn the new functions with the PowerPoint presentation, so bear with me. All right. Mental illness, it does not discriminate. And when I say this, it is pretty consistent across all races, genders, socioeconomic status, ethnicities. It does not discriminate. It impacts us as a whole human population. It takes many different forms, as I sort of mentioned. There are more extreme cases where it's more work, more effort, more sort of physical therapy in its own way, right? That we're doing counseling and medication management and those sort of areas. Whereas some forms are, I don't need medication and sort of ongoing counseling. I can sort of manage this on my own, and I'll be able to work through the illness. And it is treatable. What I really like to draw and make the connection, if we ignore sort of the mental health issues, it is possible that we can then develop a mental illness, right? And I think that's really important right now, especially during a time where you might be feeling like I'm living day to day, or I'm finally starting to come out of that feeling of like I'm living day to day, and I'm adjusting to the grief and loss of the situation that I've been in, and I'm starting to take a breath maybe and being like, wow, whew, okay. Been a lot of craziness the last 7-8 months here. If we don't shift and really start to focus on that mental health, if we keep putting ourselves under this constant strain and stress, it's very likely that then you could develop a mental illness, right? Eventually our bodies break down. We're not meant to be functioning at, 110% pedal to the metal constantly, because eventually our bodies just give out. So this is why I think this topic is so important, because just as often as we talk about physical health, and how important physical health is when you go to your doctor, right? Or when you talk to friends, mental health is just as important to prioritize and say, this is something daily that I am going to be working on to make sure that I am still functioning the best that I can. Mental health, again, we all have mental health versus mental illness. I'll talk a little bit more about statistics, but about 1 in 5 individuals might be impacted and actually have like a diagnosable mental illness in their lifespan. So what does this mean in the current climate, right? And in the situation of COVID, right? And global pandemic. We've really been framing this where I work and with some people that I work with, and again, sort of those front lines as mental health professionals, is this idea of like a traumatic event. So this is really an extraordinary event or series of events, which is sudden, March 16th, right? For some people, it's sudden, it's overwhelming, often dangerous, either to oneself or significant others, right? So there's really this perception of a danger, a direct danger on myself or ones around me. And it's not something we're prepared for usually, right? A sudden event, we perceive it as threatening. And again, it sometimes challenges our ability to cope and manage in this situation. I really just like this slide. It really talks about sort of the common phases of what a critical incident or a traumatic event, sort of how you're feeling throughout the situation. And what I really like to focus on, right, depending on, how aware you were or informed, or the information that you were taking in back in January, February, you might have some warnings, some threat, and then actually the situation happens. And you might have noticed even in yourself that for a couple weeks there, you were having like some really great, what we would say like a honeymoon phase. Maybe you'd shifted to being more isolated, staying at home. I know myself, I was like, oh, this I can make this work. I can, do dishes and clean the house a little bit during my lunch breaks. And I can, I'm going to really make the most out of this new opportunity and situation. And then it really starts to hit usually after a week or two here, this disillusionment phase of like, oh, this is not going back to the way that I had thought it was going to be going back to. And you're really coming to a lower area of your ability to sort of feel like, okay, I'm feeling mentally healthy, mentally well, as you're working through some of that grief, right? The world that I had known, the routine I had known, the interactions I had known, they are different. And I'm trying to work through that and process that and understand that. And especially with a situation that is ongoing, right? You might sort of bounce back between some of these phases. So, you sort of going up your scale toward working back to like a new beginning, a new way of sort of perceiving things. And we might have little dips along the way because it's tough because we're sort of constantly dealing with the reminder that, hey, this is still happening, right? So I bring this up to normalize if you've been feeling off, if you've been feeling down, if you've just, it's been harder for me the last couple months, you're not alone. It's a very common phenomenon. It's how it should be happening, because again, it's an event that is outside of our control, and it's sudden and we don't plan for it. So what do we know then, right? What do we know about what quarantine has done for our situation? And then of course, how does that play into our mental health and our overall well-being? So the impact is going to linger. We're seeing that as people that are working with maybe people that are a little bit more impacted. So some of the things that you're experiencing, some of that might linger. As we reopen, numbers are going to keep going up, possibly. Need to be prepared in the future, right? We want to be adaptable and flexible, that there might be some physical distancing that's going to happen again. Our economy is in shock. Inequities, things that there's already been some large distance is going to widen. So we might see even more people that are impacted in greater levels. It's been chaotic, right? We've been hearing different things, even with schools opening, and some are shutting down. Some had, you might have grandkids or even, children that are sort of trying to manage this and deal with this stress. So it's impacting us, right? And it's impacting you, as maybe older adults that are trying to help support. And then we're all trying to just, what does this look like? So again, that's hard to live in uncertainty. So it's going to be important to talk about what can we do then to be able to manage in the best that we can. This grief is complex. And it is, if you've been anybody that's lost someone that's close to you, these losses that we're experiencing, routine, stability, normalcy, that's a direct impact on us. So you might be feeling some of the same symptoms, experiences that you would if you had another grief response of someone that you love that was close to you and that's passed on. And I also like to talk about this idea of surge capacity. And so when I say that, I talked about, mental health. We're not meant to have sort of the pedal running, right? At 110 miles per hour, because our tank is going to empty. If you're constantly feeling like we're running really high, the gas tank starts to empty, right? So that capacity for us to be like, okay, another problem-solving situation. Okay, I can surge, right? I can add that extra energy, add that extra gas that I need to sort of address that concern. But if we're constantly running a little high because everything's uncertain and our body's just doing that naturally to try to protect itself, when we have another stressor on top of everything that's happening, or even if it's something small, like I got cut off while I was driving, right? And usually I can problem solve that in my head and say, this is not a big deal, we're safe, I'm okay. I might not have that extra capacity to see the situation in a different way. Okay? So importantly enough, knowing that all of these things are going to keep happening, keep impacting us, how do we proactively try to create that new future? And I would challenge that. That is through how do we proactively manage then our own mental well-being, right? Our mental health, so we can be able to continue to meet the demands that are being challenged to us, thrown at us. So I'm seeing a quick question. Katie, would you be able to just read that one out for us?
Absolutely. What is the medical community game plan in regards to the influx of depressed people?
So I don't want to speak to the larger community, but I think that is a fantastic question, and a question that needs to start being asked. The demand, especially, again, speaking as somebody that just practices in this community, the demand of need compared to the availability right now of mental health professionals is we might not necessarily be able to meet it. And yet a lot of what I've seen is nonprofits adapting and trying to be flexible. Luckily, even telehealth, this idea of telehealth has been able to create some flexibility to be able to meet those needs, both to allow greater access, decrease some barriers for people to get service. And then it also, of course, adds that extra safety factor of I'm not having to be face-to-face in person. But I think definitely it's going to be something that we're going to be seeing the outcome or the impact on in the upcoming months here, especially as we're sort of 7-8 months out, which a lot of those that have been maybe more isolated, now that you're going back to even what we've been seeing, back to the workplace, you have more eyes on you. People are noticing that you've been more impacted, maybe whereas you've been able to hide it. So we're starting to see even an increased need sort of coming out of this, sort of the opening up of the quarantine and the more isolation piece of the pandemic that we've been in. So those numbers will keep going up. Great question. So with mental illness and then this idea of mental health, sometimes there's some misconception here that, if I have a mental illness, then therefore I do not have, strong mental health. And that's not true, right? Just as maybe I might have low mental health, but that does not necessarily mean I already have a mental illness. So, we're really talking about how it's a continuum here. So I, as a person that maybe might be diagnosed with a mental illness, I could, again, be doing all of the work that I need to do to manage it. Maybe I'm seeing a counselor, or I have some medication management. I have some really great, coping tools and things that I do within my head or on a day-to-day basis to be able to keep my strong mental health. So then the mental illness isn't taking over, right? Just like somebody that has diabetes, I'm managing my diet. I might be taking insulin, or I might even be at a place where I don't have to take insulin because of how my diet's been managing, how my body then manages, my sugar intake. So again, there's a continuum here of sort of impact, which I think is just helpful to point out, because again, sometimes we have this, maybe narrative that's given to us sometimes in media that, people with mental illness, it's bad, it's terrible, and yet again, treatable, curable, manageable, diseases or illnesses out there. And just as important, again, that connection between if we're managing our mental health, it's going to decrease the likelihood we develop an illness. Just as we, ideally exercise and have a healthy diet, it's going to decrease the likelihood of high blood pressure or heart disease later in life. So another important thing just to be managing on a day-to-day basis. There is another sort of myth out there that mental health problems are not as common in older adults. This is true and false in its own way. So it's very similar statistics. So 1 in 5 American adults live with a mental health disorder, which is about that 20% range, which is the same sort of statistic or range that older adults also are impacted by. Depression is usually one of the leading mental illnesses that older adults face. And I'm sure we could go into a lot of different reasons for why that makes sense. We add, again, global pandemic and the isolation and sort of the change of completely norms to this. We're already seeing that the normal levels of mental health problems or even like illnesses and diagnoses are already increasing. So again, I think it's a very timely question to ask. What are we doing, right? What's the medical community doing to deal with the influx of depressed people? Because it's very likely that this 20% sort of statistic norm is going to be increasing. And what's important to even recognize and know that even before this situation was happening, 60% of people with a mental problem don't seek the help that they need, right? They don't seek treatment. They don't seek another perspective. They might not even bring it up to their primary care doctor. It's possible their primary care doctor doesn't even ask about this at our annual checkup visits. And stigma is one of those main reasons. And it's important just to think about that, because if already 60% of people that may be impacted and could use help were not reporting, and that gives us a sort of normal stat of 20%, 1 in 5 people, it is very likely that number is much higher, which it might be even much higher now, right? So you might be looking at maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 3 individuals that could use some just extra support, some extra help, right? Can mental health impact your physical health? This would be true, right? Higher distress levels. So again, sort of going back to that running the car really fast analogy, and then we're saying we're depleting the engine of gas. Eventually that engine gives out, right? We can't keep moving the car without gas in there. So high distress levels, you being under high distress, can start to impact your physical health. Physical health is very connected with your mental health. It's 32% more likely that an individual that has a mental illness could also develop like a co-occurring physical health condition. That's because a lot of times, even people that are struggling with depression, we've seen that they've had higher rates of heart disease, because again, your body is not functioning at its best if you're dealing with depression, because it's like you're trying to put all that energy into how do I fix this? How do I even try to move forward? So then the other parts of our physical health is not functioning at its best. And again, they're very connected together, physical health and mental well-being.
Jocelyn, we have a question that came through.
Yeah, perfect.
What's the difference between depression and anxiety?
Yeah, so depression and anxiety are two different types of diagnoses. Depression is more under the realm of mood disorders. So your symptoms usually decrease motivation. Sometimes people have some of that, like suicidal ideation, decrease eating, or possibly an increase in eating. Really starts to, again, just as anxiety will, impact sort of the overall physical functioning of your body, and usually is due to some chemical imbalance that's happening in the brain, which again, why it can be treatable, because sometimes medication plus other things can help sort of get the chemical balance back on track here, so we're not feeling as impacted, and then I can start to build up some other things to do on a day-to-day basis to be making sure that I'm, again, feeling at my best. Some people that experience depression, sort of say like it's sort of feeling like a half-life. I'm not fully present. I'm not really able to enjoy things as much as I used to. Loss of that interest, that pleasure in things. Whereas anxiety, on the other hand, usually some people, it's like you sort of bounce back between the two spectrums, actually. Increase excessive worry, right? It's getting really stuck in your head, and it's sort of like you're amped up, you're revving at like 110% all the time. Can't slow down. Some of that thinking, that worrying can be connected with like panic attacks as well, depending on the type of anxiety that you're managing, because there's a lot of different types of anxiety, just as depression sort of falls into a lot of different types of categories. I think what's great even about that question is sometimes people that have one can also be diagnosed with the other, because it's like your body's sort of ping-ponging back between those two extremes, and even with anxiety can be managed through medication management, and also then some other rethinking sort of tools and techniques. And a little bit later in the presentation, we'll be talking about, again, how do we proactively manage our mental health, and some of that is some of the similar tools that we would be using if you were diagnosed with like anxiety, depression, or some other mental illness. sometimes there's some myth out there that I can't do anything for a person with a mental health problem. And again, this is a mental health problem or even like a mental illness. And that's really false. You know, your friends, your coworkers, loved ones, somebody that you just sort of see on a day-to-day basis can really make a huge difference in what somebody's facing and the challenges that they're trying to manage and deal with. So what can you do? You can recognize warning signs, reach out, right? And especially with, you know, some of the isolation that's been occurring, if somebody is withdrawing more, maybe not communicating as much, if you might have had like a virtual book, you know, group set up, or you know, some other activity that's outside, and you keep noticing that maybe somebody that used to always be there isn't there anymore, could be an early warning sign that, hey, maybe I need to reach out and make a little bit more of an effort if I again have the energy, the ability to be able to do this. Being aware of supports available, and at the end of this presentation, I have a couple different lists and numbers, areas that you can always call for extra support if you're even hearing some of this presentation thinking like, maybe an extra perspective could be helpful to see if I'm struggling with something, and maybe what can I do a little bit differently here. And then listening, right? Listening to people with some concerns right now, because sometimes just feeling heard, just feeling, you know, validated and like, oh, okay, like, you know, someone's just hearing and listening to me can be enough to start to help somebody get moving out of sort of that lower place that they might be in. So some warning signs that we just want to be paying attention to, that maybe my mental health could start to be compromised. And again, some of these are, of course, clear symptoms of depression, anxiety, you know, other mental health illnesses. And sometimes it's just, I'm starting to get a little impacted here. And I need to do something a little bit differently to help make sure that I get myself out of this, and maybe we look at that critical incident, sort of grab out of this slump a little bit quicker if I can, right? So any decreases or extreme increases in appetite, you know, extreme weight changes and fluctuations that you're maybe not trying to do, that could be a sign that something is going on for you. Depressed mood lasting longer than 2 weeks, right? Because sometimes we have just blue days. My mom used to always call them sort of the blue meanie days. She's a big Beatles fan, and the blue meanies were Yellow Submarine. But so any depressed mood or sort of you know, sadness that's lasting for more than 2 weeks is starting to hit like, oh, there could be some concern here. Feeling numb, emotionless, right? I'm just not enjoying things the way that I used to. This is going to be a big one that we're going to start to see even more, is that increased use of alcohol, drugs, tobacco, caffeine. You know, we're even starting to see with, you know, more federal cutbacks and defunding, the access for like substance use services in the community are greatly depleted. And sometimes it feels in that moment like, oh, I'm not feeling well, I can grab a glass of wine, I can grab a beer. That gives me this natural little quick high. And yet we've already been seeing a really large increase in this community of substance use concerns, misuse concerns that are increasing. Feelings of worthlessness, inappropriate guilt, helplessness, any thoughts of suicide. And again, if you're hearing those or seeing those even in yourself, there are numbers you can call, there are people you can talk to right in the moment. And it does not mean that, you know, they're going to come see you and people are going to be sent to your house. It's just, no one should be feeling this hurt and this stuck and in it alone when we have some options out there. Physical problems that can otherwise be explained, unexplained fatigue, energy loss, sleep changes. And I think what's, again, important just to highlight here is some of these warning signs, right? They could be also warning signs of medical conditions too. So if you're experiencing something, it's just going to be helpful to get an extra perspective. Talk to your primary care doctor. And there's, again, there'll be a list of numbers of maybe even mental health supports that are out in the community that you can call and get another perspective on as well. Things that you might be seeing in others. So really big changes in appearance. Somebody that's usually pretty well put together, well kept, no longer sort of disheveled, dirtier clothes. I know that when I first had my little one, I would definitely be coming into the office some days and being like, oh goodness gracious, like people are gonna think, sort of it's a pattern that you're starting to see over time. So I just want to highlight this. We can all have a bad day, a rough day, but if we're seeing sort of a pattern and a change over time, that's when it might be a little bit more concerning that there's a problem happening here. Any confusion, disorientation, problems with concentration or decision making, memory loss, especially recent short-term memory problems. Those are pretty correlated with maybe struggling with a mental illness or some mental health concerns. That social withdrawal, really a big warning sign as well that you might be seeing in somebody else. And really trouble handling finances, working with numbers. So again, just some warning signs. And what's tough, right, is some of these could be medical. Some of these could just be minimal parts of the aging process. But again, extreme depressed mood lasting for more than 2 weeks, just because we're older, just because we're dealing with this global pandemic, just because the list can go on here for it does not mean that we have to be feeling off. It does not have to mean that we have to keep feeling sad or low, right? And understanding that we're going to be in this for a while because it's uncertainty and we don't know when it's going to end. There are things that we need to start doing to shift out of this, to sort of get out of this upward track even quicker. And I wish I could pull the slide quickly, but I'm not going to embarrass myself with trying to go back to that slide quickly with this new technology. If you even notice, there's the post functioning after like a traumatic event or a critical incident that can even be higher than where you were functioning before, right? So there are things that we can do to even be, thriving after a situation that we quite hadn't planned for. Sometimes out of crisis comes opportunity. So if we don't change it all, right, maybe something magical just happens. So sometimes we have this idealized thinking, well, if I don't have to do anything different, right, maybe it's just going to happen. This is work, just like physical health is work. But it's also work to be feeling low and tired and not doing well either. So where do you want to put your energy in, right? So again, this is really going to start moving into the part of the presentation of what do we do about it? Fine, we understand that the current world situation we're in could be playing on our own mental health, our own well-being. We understand that if we don't change, it's possible if you're in a place where you're not feeling like you're functioning at your best, it could eventually lead to a mental illness, which then could have physical illness implications after the fact. So what do we do about it, right? Where can we put our energy to actually, again, fill up that tank, make sure that we're feeling and we're adapting at our best? Just wanted to check time quickly. All right. So this idea of resilience, right? It's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, right? Traumatic experience that we're in, threats, or even a significant source of stress. Resilience is something that we can build up, right? Just like you can build up your muscle strength, just as you can build up your memory capacity. There are things that we can do to target this and build this up so we can keep bouncing back and have better mental well-being. It's really connecting to purpose, having a healthy sense of control, optimism, which sometimes can be hard. It's like retraining basically your thought pattern, your thought process to be more positive or seeing the positive. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that and actually challenge yourself and try to train yourself to do that. Be flexible, have supports around you, increase supports, which I'll be talking a little bit more, especially in this theme, right, or this term of social isolation or social distancing. And then focusing on problem solving instead of getting stuck in I can't do anything, right? There's nothing I can do, because then we start to feel hopeless, we start to feel trapped, and then that can sort of build up a more negative narrative in our head. So how do we promote that resiliency? I would challenge that we prioritize some stress reduction. We're going to do some practicing of stress reduction today. And again, I have no video. I can't see anybody else, so trust that no one else is seeing you either. So if I ask you to do some silly things, please just run with it, okay? Our physical health can be an area that we can also build up, because again, there's that really strong connection between physical health and mental health, social connection. and then slowing down our thinking, right? Sort of retraining our thought process. So we're going to be talking about some tips, tools, and strategies to be able to do that. Before we move into the what to do or how to sort of build up this mental health, did anybody else have any questions or things that they're a little confused on, had some clarifying things about?
One of the questions I'm seeing is, can you please give examples of what inappropriate guilt is?
Yeah. So inappropriate guilt would be this idea of sort of extreme outside of the situation. So usually with some mental illnesses, it's sometimes like a thought pattern that's getting stuck that's not healthy in your head. So in extreme guilt situations, maybe it's I had to cancel on somebody to go to an event, or like I was going to meet up with a friend group, or was going to help out my daughter or maybe my son with a situation, and you get so stuck in your head feeling like, I should have been able to push through and make myself do that. I'm a terrible person for canceling and not being supportive to somebody else that's around me. They're going to really start to hate me because I'm not being helpful or supportive, or I'm not there. Right. So more of that extreme thinking that's around a situation versus maybe what we would call like balanced thinking, right? My son or daughter will understand that I had to cancel. My friend will understand that I had to cancel because something just came up. I'm doing the best that I can right now. Right. That might be a more balanced way of thinking versus extreme guilt. It's extreme thinking around a situation. That's then you start to internalize and say, like, I'm a terrible person. I'm awful for doing this. And that guilt starts to eat you up versus more that balanced thinking.
Okay, thank you. That's all I'm seeing right now.
All right, perfect. Again, any questions throughout, definitely throw them out there. It's different not seeing faces, and it feels sad on my end because I don't get that social connection piece. I'm a social worker. I like to see eyes. So any questions you have, definitely open to them. All right. The ways that we can start to build up, our resiliency. Physical health, a big one. If anyone would feel comfortable maybe in the question and answer, anything that maybe you've done to maybe adapt or change your physical health, or things that maybe you were doing for your physical health sort of pre-COVID and then post-COVID, anything that you've done to get creative here when it comes to physical health, or things that you are doing for your physical health.
Not seeing anything yet. And also, if your panel didn't pop up for you, there's a chance, if you look at the bottom right side of your screen, you'll see a box with a question mark. And if that's not there, if you're on a tablet, tap your screen, you'll see a button with 3 dots, and then you can access it. So there you go. Oh, one of the questions that just popped up is depression hereditary?
Yeah. So depending, right? So there is a lot of different research out there that shows that there is sort of a contribution of like 3 different factors. So your genetics could make you a little bit more predisposed to depression or mental illness. Environmental factors, so things that you're growing up in, if you're in constant like stressful situations, or dealing with a lot of different adversities, can sort of pile on. And then also your own sort of makeup, right? Your ability to, see things as more optimistic, to reframe situations. So it's really a combination of sort of 3 different factors: you as a person, your genetics, and then environmental situations and factors that are happening. Looks like somebody's mentioning some things that they've been doing for their physical health: yoga, meditation, and breathing exercises. I think yoga is this wonderful example of how we combine mental health with physical health, because breathing and meditation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, is a really great stress reduction technique to sort of give ourselves a break, so we can recharge a little bit and sort of get that surge capacity a little bit more full. Anything else, things that you've been doing for your physical health, or something you've had to adapt or do differently because gyms closed down, or workout groups closed down? I was really big when I was at home. I would purposely make myself walk up and down the stairs 10 times. I usually get up a lot when I'm at the office because I'm greeting clients or I'm greeting people, and I was not doing that at home. So I was like, I gotta do something a little bit more creative here because I can't sit in my chair all day long anymore.
We had another question come through. What can we do to help someone who's bipolar, and is that hereditary?
Yeah. So again, bipolar, just like some of the other mental illnesses, they do look at some of those 3 factors that might contribute to it. And again, I don't want to say 3 factors like 33% of this, 33.333%, 33 point. It's so variable depending on the person and the situation and the experiences that that person's been through. Just as with anybody that might be struggling with a mental illness, listening, being supportive. But I also really like to highlight there's only so much that you might be able to feel like you can do. So knowing sort of your boundaries and what can I do here? And that sort of goes back to this idea of resilience, right? A healthy sense of what can I control, what's in my control. And you as a person that might be supporting somebody with mental illness are going to sort of know what is my boundary or what is actually within my control and what can I be helpful with. But I think, again, listening, being there, offering specific help can always be helpful. And if this person is not linked with services, bipolar, again, it's usually a lifelong mental illness, and yet it's manageable, it's treatable. So making sure that person is getting support to help manage their own well-being and mental health.
Thanks, Jocelyn. We actually have one of the comments, someone walking outside helps, but days like today are depressing.
Yes. And I would agree. I walked out today and said, oh darn, like I left my umbrella at work, but I'm going to run to my car, right? So trying to get out. How can we be creative then with walking? It looks like there's a larger question in the Q&A, Katie. I don't know if you can read that one for me.
Yep. I am a senior caregiver for a person that has Parkinson's and dementia, trying to keep both a happy mental health, finding I'm not able to keep focused. What suggestions are there for me / us to maintain a happy, reasonable mental health day?
Yeah. You set me up for the next couple slides here. So we'll start talking about, what can I do, right, to try to keep a healthier mindset for myself so I can have a happy, reasonable mental health day. So I'll definitely come back to that comment. So I'll be moving on from physical health, but again, I sort of mentioned there's really great, strong connection between our physical health and then our mental well-being, even if it's, again, 15, 20 minutes a day. Something you've probably been hearing from your, primary throughout your lifetime. I know even when I was younger, 3 to 4 times a week, 20 minutes. There's a lot of evidence that shows it helps reduce that stress and get rid of tension. It decreases anxiety and depression. That's because it naturally is a way to boost some of those like happier hormones, those chemicals in your brain. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, sometimes anxiety and depression can be due to chemical imbalance in your brain. So physical health is a natural way to get those endorphins, to get those chemicals, to be able to basically they connect with like the happier receptors in your brain, so that way you feel elevated, you feel better. People might talk about like this idea of like a runner's high, right? And that's because it's actually those chemicals attaching to like our happy receptors in our brain. And overall, it can help boost overall well-being and health. So physical health is a great way that we can try to increase our resiliency, even if it's, something short that you're doing throughout the day for you. I was doing a self-care presentation and somebody had mentioned there's an app on your phone that gives you basically like desk stretches. So, or sitting at your chair stretches. So I can give some of these resources even to Katie after this, and maybe she can push that out for anybody that was registered. Another great way to increase our resiliency is building up our social supports. Again, you keep hearing this term, right? So social isolation. No, it's social distancing, right? We don't have to isolate. We can still be connected, even in a time where we might have to create some physical distancing. And I would challenge, how do we try to make sure to do that? Because actual connection with others, it releases dopamine, oxytocin, which again, sort of those pleasure hormones in our body. That helps manage our stress, increase levels of stress, right? Running the car at 100 miles per hour while the gas depletes, eventually burns out the car, just like it's going to burn out our body. So we have to manage that stress in a better way. It increases our self-esteem if there's connection, increased life expectancy, increased overall well-being. A lot of research around how humans, we are social creatures. I would challenge most of us are. Some people, it's just sort of not your thing necessarily. But a large percentage of us need that connection to be able to sort of help thrive. It gives you a connection to a greater purpose, giving back. So how do we increase connection instead of decrease isolation, right? We want to increase that connection overall. Volunteer opportunities, connecting with friends, part-time work, community engagement, really trying to find purpose or connection, right, to something maybe that's larger than ourselves. There's a lot of supports out there, even as I said at the end of the presentation about, maybe having a therapist, support, counseling. There's peer groups out there. There's a lot of ways to have connection, even if we're being socially distant. And, there's 30 of us that are even here today on a Zoom or a WebEx platform. And a lot of these support groups or even maybe other opportunities have shifted and are trying to be adaptable and flexible. So there could be some virtual possibility here as well. Another area that it starts to play into, I think Marge's question here about what are some suggestions for us to be able to have a happy, reasonable mental health day, especially if we are dealing with a lot, right? And we're dealing with a lot of stressors. So how do we, right, slow down our thinking so we can move from reacting, which might be sort of how you've been feeling the last 6-7 months. I'm just sort of reacting. What's the next information? Okay, what can I do next? Which is a different way of thinking because it's your emotions are taking over. It's starting to control us versus there's a step that happens right before those emotions, and that's thoughts, right? So what we think about a situation. So I'll go back to that really quick example of I get cut off while I'm driving, right? I can think really quickly, wow, what a jerk. He was trying to, get me off the road here. Or which is going to lead to I'm probably going to start feeling irritated, maybe even angry, depending on what's going on for me that day. And then that might lead to then my behavior, what I do about it, right? I could ideally, right, not do this, but maybe start to road rage a little bit, sort of get a little bit closer to that person that just cut me off, or maybe I carry that into the workplace and I sort of walk in the door and I'm like, just irritated because I'm already feeling angry and frustrated from the day. Or can I respond to that situation differently? Because again, the first step is what I think about it. So someone cuts me off, that's the situation. And instead of thinking, wow, what a jerk, I could have just been really hurt. Wow, they must really be in a rush. I hope that, they're going to be okay and get to where they need to go. Right. And that's harder to do sometimes, to slow down our thinking enough to try to change up the perception of what's happening around us. Because if I'm thinking, wow, they must really be in a rush or they're running late and I hope they're okay, that's going to change how I feel about it, right? I'm going to have some empathy around that. I'm going to think I might not even get irritated or frustrated. And that, again, saves some of that surge protection for me, because anger, irritability, that takes a lot of energy out of me, right? But empathy, that sometimes can refill me. And then I'm not going to be driving too close to that person. When I walk into the door at work, I'm going to say, hey, good morning to, the person that always greets us there, because I'm in just a better headspace where I'm responding and taking the situation differently, perceiving it differently. So I'm going to ask you, sorry, I just jumped to the slide, but before I go to this, I'm going to ask you just to take a look at the next slide and tell me what you see. All right, we're trying to slow some things down here. So what did you see? Was the man looking at you, looking away? put it in the Q&A if you'd like.
Both.
Both. All right. Anyone only see it one way? Or you saw it one way, then had to take a second and go, wait, no, there actually is a different way that I'm looking at it?
We have 3 both so far.
Right. We show it again. All right, I'm going to go back quickly. All right. Got a profile look. So this is really just trying to show, and someone started to type, it looked like it popped away. Right, depending on the situation, depending on if we slow down our thinking enough, right, it can look like someone's looking at us, but even if we take another step back and look at it in a different way, that's sort of what draws my attention. I see maybe a profile instead of a frontward look, or we can see the whole, right? And you can start to switch and sort of understand and see the differences and nuances between the two, right? And this is just trying to be an example of what can we do to try to reframe our thinking so we can respond to situations, see different perspective instead of reacting just to maybe one thing. Nope, it was just a profile, that's all I saw, right? Because there's usually a bigger picture here. And that's a part of resiliency and a part of our brain we have to train up to make sure that we're improving our mental health and having better, these reasonable mental health days, right? So I'm going to ask you to read this forward. So read this from the front to the top down, starting with I am very ugly. Read all the way to the bottom. And then I want you to read it backwards, with starting with am I as ugly as people say and going from the bottom up.
Jocelyn, we do have at least one person calling in too, so maybe if you wouldn't mind, you could read it to us in a second after everyone's finished.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Give about 30 more seconds, then I'll read it out loud. All right, so if we read this forward, right, it reads as, I am very ugly. So don't try to convince me that I'm a very beautiful person, because at the end of the day, I hate myself in every single way. And I am not going to lie to myself by saying there is beauty inside of me that matters, that I am worthless, a terrible person, and nothing you say will make me believe I still deserve love, because no matter what, I'm not good enough to be loved, and I'm in no position to believe that beauty does exist within me. Because whenever I look in the mirror, I always think, am I as ugly as people say? All right. So if we read that forward, even I'm feeling a little heavy. And I knew what it was going to say, right? Versus let's read this backwards. Am I as ugly as people say? Because whenever I look in the mirror, I always think beauty does exist within me. And I am in no position to believe that I am not good enough to be loved, because no matter what, I still deserve love. And nothing you say will make me believe that I am worthless, a terrible person. There is beauty inside of me that matters, and I am not going to lie to myself by saying I hate myself in every single way, because at the end of the day, I am a very beautiful person. So don't try to convince me that I am very ugly. Right? I'm even feeling different reading it backwards, right? And again, the narrative we have in our head is very powerful. Right? What we think about ourselves, how we view situations can be very powerful, and perspective is everything. And that is a way that we can build up our resiliency, by actually trying to change how we think. And that means we're changing the questions that we're asking ourselves in our head. We're shifting the power of what's happening around us with the type of questions that we're asking. right? So again, narrative that's in our head can be a really powerful thing to either make us feel one way or the other. And how can we increase our well-being is actually challenging ourselves to change how we think about situations, think about ourselves. So asking yourself questions about what gives me hope, right? Instead of, oh, this situation is hopeless. This is never going to pass. This is never going to end. Sure, I could ask myself that. How is that question helping me build my resiliency and therefore build my mental well-being? Or can I say, well, what does give me hope? What does make me feel like I have some purpose in a situation that feels pretty purposeless right now? If I were taking care of myself right now, what would I be doing? What would I be doing differently? Challenging to ask yourself these things. You know, I'm not feeling quite at 100%. So if I were actually taking care of myself right now, what would I do? Asking yourself, who have I asked for help with success in the past? Who have I had to go to and talk to get a different perspective to be able to find a way through this? That might be friends, that might be a neighbor, that might be children, a parent. You know, if your parents not here, what would my mom tell me is differently? What would that close person in my life tell me they need to see me doing differently if I was taking care of me? What have I done to adjust to changes in the past? Right? This time, this situation, this is constant change. So what have I done to adjust to that change in the past? How have I managed that? How have I gotten through that? We have all been through large changes and transitions in our lives, and we're still here, right? You're still here. I've never been a big tech person. I'm the worst millennial ever, and I have figured out WebEx, right? So what have I done to make adjustments and changes in the past, right? I've shifted my perspective and said, fine, I can't reach people the way I used to because I can't see them in person. What do I have to do to adapt? Because I still find purpose and meaning in supporting others that are struggling. Right? When have I felt positive before? Was there any small moments this last week I did feel positive? How do I recreate that? Right? And what do other people see when I'm taking care of myself? Right? What do they see that I'm doing differently? Right? I'm seeing just a quick note in the question A. Will a copy of this be made available? I could definitely send this on to Katie, so that way there's a copy of the presentation available. Someone's bringing up sort of this idea of mindfulness is so difficult in this polarizing political climate. Yeah, either wherever you sort of stand. Again, it's I can even go back to that simple example of someone cuts me off, and my first thought can be, that person is a jerk, or it can be, how do I try to still have empathy, and how do I still try to look at the situation differently? I can't control the political environment. I can't control the media, but I can control how I view situations. I can control what information I'm consuming and how it's then, impacting me. Some people had sort of mentioned, right when this all like COVID hit, at least in March, I actually had to decrease my media consumption for a little bit, because while I wanted to feel informed, it actually started to do the opposite effect and make me feel even more fearful and more scared. So being purposeful in what we're consuming as a way of being resilient. I want to be respectful again of time. I know we only go to 11, Katie. So I'm going to do one more very quick practice of a mindfulness practice. It's only going to take us about 60 seconds. It's this concept of mindfulness, right? We can be mindful and actually mindful of all the things sort of around us, or we can be mindful and grounded to what's just in front of us and in the present moment. So a mindfulness practice is a stress reduction technique that you can practice to, again, sort of reground back to the present moment. It helps shift off maybe some of that negative thinking or getting stuck in your head, to give your body a little chance to recharge, right? Increase some of that surge, put some more gas in the tank, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to ask that if you are comfortable, Sit in your chair, or if you're on your couch, make sure that your body's in a comfortable position. And if you feel comfortable, put your hands in your lap and close your eyes. I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, and exhale. 1, 2, 3. Take another deep breath in and exhale. Allow your breathing to return to whatever's normal for you. Pay attention to where your breath is in your body. Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your belly? If your mind has started to wander, that's okay. Bring it back to where your breath is in your body. Take another deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, and exhale. Take a moment. Do you hear anything around you in the room? How does your body feel in the chair or in your couch? Anything feeling achy, off? If your mind has started to wander, that's okay. Redirect it back to the breath in your body. Take another deep breath in and exhale. And when you're ready, open your eyes and take a moment to recognize how you feel in this moment. So this is a quick stress reduction technique. This is called a mindfulness, a grounding practice. That was 60 seconds. Hopefully you're feeling a little lighter, maybe a little bit, in a calmer place. Again, this can be a way to slow the day down. That took 1 minute, right? Versus sometimes getting stuck in our own head can take upwards of 5, 10, 15 if we feel really frustrated or irritated. So this is, again, a different type of muscle that you can work to try to look at the day differently, to sort of refresh, reground, just as we change our thinking and the questions that we're asking ourselves, connecting to those and people around us that bring us purpose and make us feel connection and purpose again in our day-to-day, prioritizing physical health, being creative in what that looks like. These are all things that we can do to increase our resiliency, and our resiliency will help us adapt to change, to situations we're not quite prepared for, and really help that overall well-being, right, and that mental health, which is an important thing, because we all deserve to be feeling good, and seeing the world in a way that is manageable, and I can adapt, I can change, I can walk through this and walk within it. So I appreciate the time today. I apologize I went a little bit over. I could talk about this for hours, I'm sure. I'll definitely make the PowerPoint and presentation slide available, and a couple of the resources that I talk about throughout the presentation are at the end of this, so that way you can look through and have access to that. And Katie, thank you so much for bringing me in. I really appreciate the adapting to a different way of connecting with people. As much as I fought it at first, I'm really excited about it. So thank you for bringing us in.
Well, Jocelyn, thank you for your time, sharing your expertise. And this was empowering, right? We can have a healthy sense of control over this. There's things we're able to do. And I will plan on just sending the slides out to everybody who attended today, because I think we could all use it, especially the phone numbers that are associated. And we're getting a lot of thank yous. So just appreciative for your time and everyone joining us.
Perfect. All right. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day. The rain will stop. It'll get warmer. All right.
I think so. All right. Take care, everyone.